SpaceX. Mr. Hedler, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was fired.
Thank you. I think everybody on the panel knows what the answer to these questions were. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Inspector General was investigating Musk's Neuralink. Mr. Talcove, now I'll ask you again under oath, do you know what Mr. Trump did to that Inspector General that was looking into one of Musk's companies?
No.
He was fired. The Inspector General at the EPA was repeatedly taking on Tesla. Mr. Hedler, since it seems that you're answering the questions that everyone knows the answer to, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was also fired.
Also fired. At least 5 Inspector Generals that were looking into Elon Musk's companies were fired by the Trump-Musk administration. These Inspector Generals, who are independent, protected by law, they are the people that find the waste, fraud, and abuse and found many of the cases of waste, fraud, and abuse that have been brought up today, fired because they were looking into Elon Musk. At the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to protect workers from getting their unions busted by folks like Elon Musk, made functionally broken by the so-called Department of Government Efficiency that really is the Department of Government Efficiency for Elon Musk, not for you. They are trying to shut down the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. You know what Elon Musk doesn't seem to be looking into? His own contracts. Again, I'll ask you, Mr. Talcove, do you know how much money a day Mr. Musk will receive from the federal government for his contracts?
No.
The answer is $8 million a day. Just last year, Elon Musk was promised $3 billion from close to 100 contracts with the federal government. Ms. Royal, do you know how much the average person in this country who survives on Social Security, one of our seniors who's worked their entire life, about how much they have to survive on a day?
I do not.
$65 a day. We're not looking into Elon Musk's $8 million a day. This subcommittee, chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the House Republicans, is looking into your grandmother's $65 a day. Let me be clear. I think we would all support taxpayer savings, look into money we might needlessly send to billionaires and big corporations, find taxpayer savings, and send it back to your hardworking family. But instead, what House Republicans and the Trump-Musk administration want to do is they want to look into your kids' lunch money, your kids' teacher's salary, into your grandparents' Social Security. They want to take that money and give it out in billionaire tax cuts, and they're talking about that in committee tomorrow, in Budget Committee tomorrow. They just released their plan. So let me be clear. When Republicans talk about government efficiency in this Congress, they're not looking into billionaires who don't pay their taxes. They're not looking into billionaires who get rich off of government contracts. They're not looking into Elon Musk firing watchdogs who are supposed to keep him accountable. They're looking at cutting your public schools. They're going straight for your Social Security. They're coming straight for cancer research. They're coming straight for the Department of Education. They're not looking at big tech. They're not looking at big pharma because those people fund their campaigns. If this committee were serious about rooting out waste from our federal government, then today's whole hearing would be about how Musk and Donald Trump are firing the independent watchdogs who've done this work for decades. Instead, my Republican colleagues' actual goal on this committee is to distract from Trump and from Musk's corrupt war on accountability. This will not be a subcommittee dedicated to making government efficient for everyday people. It's about helping Elon Musk and Donald Trump be as efficient as possible in robbing our government and handing out our government services to the rich. So this seems that this subcommittee is just going to be like the agency it's named after.
The gentleman's
a sham,
time has expired.
A total sham.
The American people are $36 trillion in debt. It certainly seems reasonable that someone has been fired. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
You're going to put us
Mr.
further in
Burchett.
debt with your billionaire
You're
tax
not
cuts.
recognized. Mr. Burchett, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. The gravy train for a lot of these folks, it's been on biscuit wheels, and it's about to run off the dadgum tracks, and it's about time. Could you imagine standing up here and defending waste, fraud, and abuse? But I think that's what we're seeing. When people squeal and don't ask questions, I think it shows the American public what the heck's going on. And that little gravy train is getting ready to run out. The spigot is getting ready to be turned off. Mr. Talcove, That's correct how you say your name, brother?
Yes, sir.
All right. How can the federal government improve identity verification for these entitlement programs?
Yeah, it's doing what the private sector does every single day, whether you use your bank, you go to Amazon, using those tools and moving away from some of the dated compliance standards that the federal government uses. NIST IAL 863, 2017, before there was anything called deepfakes and generative AI tools.
I was informed that PayPal has never been, they've never been able to crack into that and steal people's vital information. Are they using those systems that you would be favorable towards that government seems to be shying away from?
Yes, sir.
And describe that, how that works.
They're systems that are based on encryption. They use technology and they use data to validate you are who you say you are. The people that are stealing right now, I believe a lot of them are actually ghosts from China, Russia, Nigeria, and Romania.
I read a report today that North Korea was involved in this, in some of that as well.
They are.
And those people are our enemies. Again, they'll hate us for free. We don't have to give them taxpayer money. And are there loopholes that can be closed to avoid these improper payments? And I wish you'd describe those to me.
The biggest, most important thing, particularly in the benefit program space, is the use of self-certification. As Mr. Timmons noted, the state of Missouri is using a solution called Steady IQ to validate wages and wealth. You cannot allow individuals to provide the information based upon what they think. It has to be based on what you know, and that will stop the ghosts from using people's identities to steal money from U.S. taxpayers.
How much money do you calculate is wasted due to waste, fraud, and abuse in the entitlement programs each year?
Yeah. My number right now between federal, state, and local government is you can save $1 trillion a year by simply putting in front-end identity verification, eliminating self-certification, and monitoring the back end of the programs that are providing the benefits. Those three things.
You said you could eliminate that, but are there others you feel like some more low-hanging fruit?
I would start with those three things because they're simple. That'll take that 20% fraud rate that you're seeing in the public sector down below 5%.
Chair Lady, I would suggest that we adopt Mr. Timmons' legislation and get that out of the committee as fast as possible. What actions also could Congress take to fix these problems quickly?
Yeah, I think the first thing is updating and redoing the 1974 Privacy Act. That is virtually impossible to do data matching. It's very difficult to have data shared. And when you look back at the pandemic, data sharing and data matching would have stopped probably 50% of the $1 trillion that was stolen from taxpayers.
Any of y'all like to add anything to that?
Congressman, I would just add that rather than accepting self-attestation, that states should have to be required to actually verify people's identities. And here's the key part: before they get enrolled, they shouldn't get enrolled and then eventually come down later on down the road.
It's amazing to me. I have a doctor's appointment back in Knoxville, and the verification process is very extensive. It's more so than the federal government requires for any of this. What type of computer systems are these agencies using, and do they need updating?
They're using very dated technology, but they're also burdened. I look at the USDA, 6.2 million words in a 10,000-page document that shows how to implement the rules of the program. Nobody can figure that out. So one of the things that I think has to happen is the simplification of these processes and systems, and then just use the technology that we use every day in the private sector.
Okay, thank y'all so much for being here.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Chair Lady.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Talcove, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up where you left off really quickly. Just to be clear, the upgrades that you're talking about as it relates to our data processes, these aren't things that would be free, are they? They would cost some kind of money. Not looking for a number, but they will cost, correct?
Some are free and some would cost money.
Okay. All right. So I just want to leave it there because we've had a number of these hearings. So I do want to be clear, before the Trump administration came in, this committee did exist in the form of the Oversight Committee, and our task is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. In that vein, we had a number of hearings, at least last term. I can't speak for any other term as I'm only in my sophomore term, and we dealt with improper payments. And interestingly enough, our chairwoman, who is so passionate about this today, she missed every single one of those improper payment hearings. But just to be clear, I was there, so I don't want anyone to believe that Democrats just come to work and don't plan to do work. In fact, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that the Republicans believe our job is, because right now they have relinquished their constitutional duties over to an unelected bureaucrat, someone who no one went out to vote for. And absolutely, he is occupying the Oval Office, as we saw yesterday. And that is a first for me, to see someone occupying the Oval Office who's never actually been elected to the Oval Office and actually answering more questions than the person that allegedly got elected. But for whatever reason, this is the first time we're having a DOGE subcommittee hearing, and that guy's not here. Instead, we have y'all. So I do want to thank you for coming. But I will say this. It's also interesting to me that in the first few days of DOGE existing, we know that they are trying to get rid of the Department of Education, USAID, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're laying off FAA workers. They are going after the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, the FBI agents, and they're talking about getting rid of FEMA. And they brought y'all in. And I am going to say that I actually was shocked that there was only one person that seemed like he was an overt Trumper as you laid out your opening remarks, because I anticipated that at least one of y'all would say, yes, what Elon is doing is exactly what we would prescribe. But instead, I will applaud you because you actually were focused. You talked about what the American people are looking for us to do. We've actually consistently on this side of the aisle promoted this idea of making investments into technology so that we can do things such as, say, look at the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense that takes up approximately 50% of our discretionary income, or our discretionary spending. Approximately 50% goes to Department of Defense. Department of Defense has not been able to pass an audit in the last 6 audits, and we're not talking about pennies. I understand that we want everything to be perfect, and if we could get all waste, fraud, and abuse out, that would be fantastic. But let me talk about the big numbers. The big numbers are on that side. When we look at, say, our entire workforce, our federal workforce, as we're trying to somehow fire all of them, they don't even make up a total of 5%. It's even less than that when we look at our budget. But let's talk about defense. That just happens to be the same side of the ledger that Mr. Musk gets the vast majority of his money from. In fact, at the same time that they were unlawfully, and we will stay in court, because on this side, we believe in law and order. We believe in, a number of us are actually lawyers, but nevertheless, we understand the Constitution. We believe in that as well. And so there's things such as, impoundment, right? Because as Mr. Whitson said, he said, we need to return the power of the purse to Congress. It never left. According to the Constitution, that's where it's at. Now, I know that people are confused right now because for whatever reason, we had a guy that went in, and you talk about people invading our data. Listen, people said that they were upset about TikTok, but I'm upset about the guy that runs Twitter, who for sure is doing nefarious things, because I don't understand, if you are trying to conduct audits and figure out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, I don't know why you would go to some tech guy. In fact, it was only techies that were sitting there at inauguration. We didn't have auditors. I would welcome auditors to come in and do forensic audits. In fact, he sat there in the Oval Office yesterday and he admitted that he was lying, and he was using his propaganda machine to do it when he said that we sent millions of dollars to Gaza for condoms. That was a lie. So let me tell you something.
The
we were
gentlelady's
duly elected,
time has expired.
And it is time for
The
us
gentlelady's
to do our
time has
job
expired.
and rein in this rogue actor known
The
as
gentlelady's
Elon
time
Musk.
has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak frankly at first to the American people. We're nearing $37 trillion in national debt. What does that mean? That means that each and every U.S. taxpayer owes over $323,000. Okay? What does that mean? That means when the EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, says we have 18 trillion left. That's it. 18 trillion left to take out. And we're spending $2 trillion in debt every year. Folks, we're at the precipice of a debt, like a debt cycle. We are literally at a point in which the dollar will be worth nothing. What does that mean? And we know Social Security goes bankrupt in 8 years, right? Medicare goes bankrupt in 10 years. And then 15 years from now, the dollar is completely devalued and worth nothing. So what does that mean? That means your pension, the money in your bank, your savings is nothing. It's worthless. So what are we doing? We're trying to save this country. We're trying to save your pensions. We're trying to save your bank accounts. We're trying to save this country for the next generation. And it would be nice if we had help. But instead, we have people that are fighting us on this. And I think that I would hate to be in the Democratic Party right now because you're in a really bad bind. You're having to defend all of this crazy spending, all of this crazy waste. So how do you do it? You do ad hominem attacks. You attack the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk, right? He's rich. He must be evil, right? That's the attacks. Really? You can't do any better than that, right? Let's talk on the policy. Help us. We're trying to save this country. This is what, and Elon Musk, who's making no money doing this, is trying to save this country. Why? Because he has invested in the United States of America more than anybody, right? So I think that we should embrace it. In fact, not a single company, governor of any state would ever turn down Elon Musk and his team of DOGE from coming in and providing free services to right the course and financially in any state or organization. It's ridiculous that we would demonize someone that loves this country so much. Mr. Whitman, the formation of agencies via the executive action is not new, right? The formation of DOGE is not new. Can you are you familiar with any other previous presidencies where they've formed organizations like DOGE via executive action?
Yeah, so actually the agency that DOGE is occupying is one that was created in a previous administration. So it is something that happens routinely. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, there's been the Office of Budget Management was created, Environmental Protection Agency was created, the U.S. Digital Service, which is now DOGE, was created all by executive order, right?
And actually one other I'd add is USAID was originally created through an executive order by President Kennedy and then later formalized.
And then, Madam Chair, I have a video I would like to end with that just, let's review, if we could cue that, to remind, and I want to remind my Democratic friends, at a point in which you once had the majority of the American people on your side, this is what your party believed in.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
I think it speaks for itself. My time has expired.
The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you. I now yield to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Our Republican colleagues and the Trump administration continue to demonize our friends and neighbors who work for the federal government and swear an oath to protect the Constitution and serve the public. Thousands of civilian federal employees have given their lives in the line of duty for their country. The administration seems intent on dismantling much of the federal government in violation of the Constitution, statutes, and regulations. And our Republican colleagues are letting them do it. They want to gut the nonpartisan civil service and to convert a significant portion of the remaining civil service into political appointees. Depriving the federal government of employees' expertise and experience will harm the services that the government provides to all Americans. Mr. Hetler-Garlett, the administration is attempting to cause a mass exodus from our federal workforce. Will this increase or decrease waste, fraud, and abuse?
Thank you, Delegate Norton. I think it's pretty clear that chaos is not the friend of efficiency. If you undermine the very functionality of the government, you're not going to make it more efficient. You're going to make it worse, and it's going to cost even more money to recoup or to fix things that go wrong in the interim. So again, I mentioned earlier that if you care about waste, fraud, and abuse, firing Inspector General doesn't add up. I think if you care about government being more efficient, I think intentionally creating chaos is the opposite of that.
Well, Mr. Hetler-Garlett, do federal employees operate without oversight or rules and regulations?
No, absolutely not. They are governed by plenty of rules and regulations, and when there are independent Inspector General at the agency they're supposed to be at, they also have a cop on the beat making sure that they do so.
I want to highlight some stories demonstrating exactly the kinds of federal workers the administration is trying to force out. How about Chris Mark at the Department of Labor, whose pioneering work on mine safety has reduced minor safety deaths from roof collapses to almost zero today? Or Jared Koopman at the Internal Revenue Service, who pioneered new methods for tracking criminal cybersecurity currency transactions that led to the rescue of 23 children from rape and assault, as well as the seizure of hundreds of millions of child abuse videos and 370 pedophile arrests. This work also prevented funding from going to terrorist groups. Or Ronald E. Walters, who manages the 155 national cemeteries around the country and tends to the resting places of almost 4 million veterans. These are just a few of the federal workers who serve Americans every day. The workers are wildland firefighters, border guards, doctors, nurses, food inspectors, air traffic controllers, and law enforcement that do their civic duty, often despite the fact that they could make such more in the private sector. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now yield to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to also thank you for convening this hearing. I think it's incredibly important, and I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. Like another member of this committee, I too was once an employee of the Executive Office of the President. I worked in President Trump's White House from the very first to very last day of his first term, and I saw firsthand how entrenched and resistant the federal bureaucracy was to his agenda. So it's no surprise that today a few of my Democrat colleagues have continued that trend by using their time to bash Elon Musk instead of discussing ways to work together to advance a bipartisan cornerstone of President Trump's agenda, the mission to finally eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And I just took a rudimentary count of the Dems' testimony, or rather comments today, and I've got 27 mentions of Elon Musk and 3 mentions of waste. And I don't know if that's, in fact, the right count. Encourage anybody to fact check me, but I think it illuminates and illustrates one of the problems that we're facing, which is a lack of bipartisan effort to address these critical things that, waste, fraud, and abuse is something that should be bipartisan. The chair noted that in her opening remarks. Now, Madam Chair, you know how much I enjoy studying public opinion. So with your approval, I'd like to enter into the record the CBS News poll from this past weekend, conducted February 5th to 7th, 2025. And I'd also like to illuminate 2 findings. First, 70% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans included, believe President Trump is already doing the job that he was elected to, which is interesting because I have an article here from CNN from September 2024 that notes Trump says Elon Musk has agreed to lead proposed government efficiency commission as ex-president unveils new economic plans. So he is doing exactly what he said he would do by empowering his administration to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here today. I'd also like to note one interesting statistic from that. 62% of Americans want Democrats in Congress to work with us to advance the priorities that President Trump was elected to govern on. So I think those are 2 stats that I hope everyone pays attention to. But to ask questions of our witnesses, I'd first like to start with Mr. Talcove. One of the things that I've found very interesting from your opening testimony is you talked, and I think you engaged with Mr. Burchett on the 1974 Privacy Act. And I had some interesting folks visit my office yesterday who noted that 1/3 of all prior authorizations are still done manually by phone, fax, or direct post mail. First off, would love your comments on that, and I'd also like for you to expound upon some of the solutions that we can deliver to this Congress in modernizing that 1974 Privacy Act.
Yeah, these aren't people problems. These are technology problems. You can't process the number of individuals that are accessing our systems person by person. It just takes too much time. So by updating the 1974 Privacy Act and allowing for digital matching, you would have very quickly realized that a large portion of the PPP loan funds were going to the wrong person. You would have been quickly able to match, and I think the number was 20% were on the do not pay list. You can't expect people to do what a machine, and especially AI, can do today.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. And if I can also ask Mr. Whitson, I think we share a common interest, which is to move departments and agencies outside of Washington, D.C. It's something that I campaigned on, something that I helped President Trump effectuate in his first administration. And I have to imagine that if we have departments and agencies outside of D.C., if we've got a workforce that's more reflective of the balance that America is, we at the same time, too, could potentially root out some of this waste, fraud, and abuse by enabling other Americans, other citizens of our country to help advance some of these issues. So would love your commentary on that before my time expires.
No, I think you're exactly right, Congressman Jack. And so I think, you'd save a lot of taxpayer money. So building a headquarters in downtown D.C. versus Huntsville, Alabama, you're going to be able to save a lot of money. Number 2 is you're actually going to make life better for the employees as well. So that's a point that's also missed a lot, but commuting into D.C. versus being able to go somewhere else where it's a better cost of living and things like that might be better for the folks. And then lastly, these areas where you set up a headquarters are going to be populated by people that live in the area to fill the rank and file of staff positions. And so if you plant these federal agency headquarters in the heart of any area that's overwhelmingly one party or the other, then you're going to naturally get that sway versus something that's more representative of the people as a whole.
Well, thank you very much, our witnesses. Mindful of my time, I want to finish before my time expires. I yield back to our chairwoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Thank you.
And Chairwoman, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to enter something into the record.
So what is it?
It is a report from the Congressional Research Service, nonpartisan CRS, that lays out the rules and the law for firing inspectors general, which of course look into waste, fraud, and abuse. And
Without
that
objection.
Rule, thank you. And that rule requires for the law to be followed, for Congress to be notified with 30 days and a reason for firing inspectors general to give Congress a chance to overrule that. And that's the law. So thank you for entering that into the record.
Madam Chair.
Without objection, the materials Mr. Jack cited are also submitted for the record. I now recognize.
Yes. Apologies. While we're on it, I'd also like to ask for unanimous consent to submit for the record 2 items. One is a statement from the AFL-CIO, Department of People who work for a living with views on working people to make the government work. And the second is a statement from the Center for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington on ways to combat waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government.
Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Mexico and ranking member Ms. Stansbury for 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you once again to all of our witnesses for being here to testify. Thank you to my colleagues. We are going to have so much fun in this committee, this Congress. I actually appreciate the video that was shown just a few moments ago because when I worked at the Office of Management and Budget, I actually worked on the waste EO that was referenced that President Obama signed. But there is one fundamental difference between the presidents and vice presidents that were shown on that video and what's happening today, and that is that they followed the law. So my colleagues across the aisle who are asking us to get out of the way and stop trying to block things in the courts, let me tell you, we do not work for an unelected billionaire like apparently this guy does. We work for the American people. And so if an unelected, unvetted individual private citizen is hacking our government systems, breaking the law, firing federal employees, dismantling statutorily created agencies, withholding funds, we are going to fight you in the courts. And I'm actually really sad that my dear friend Mr. Burchett left because I want to talk about that gravy train on biscuit wheels that he just talked about, because that gravy train is not the federal workforce. It's the billionaires that are trying to hack that system right now, and which unfortunately my colleagues right now are working on a reconciliation deal to cut Medicaid, to cut Medicare, and use that money to give to tax breaks to their billionaire buddies. That is the gravy train that is actually going on here. But because this is the Oversight Committee, let's do a little bit of oversight. For the last several weeks, I've been talking to Treasury and OMB officials to try to get to the bottom of why Elon Musk and his team are trying to hack the Treasury payment system, because this is a completely nonpartisan system that literally just pays the bills of the federal government. So why are they so eager to hack this system? And I have to say that over the last several weeks, we have literally received thousands of calls in every single congressional office. In fact, we know that our friends across the aisle are also receiving these calls because this system pays the bills of the U.S. government. It pays our soldiers. It pays for the work that we do overseas. It pays your Social Security benefits. It pays your tax refunds. So why is Elon Musk and his hackers trying to access that system? And why did a senior civil servant who had overseen this system for over 30 years get asked to stand down after a 25-year-old intern working for Elon Musk tried to get access to the code for that system? Now, thankfully, they were shut down in the court system, but Musk has installed, with the president's blessing, one of his Silicon Valley buddies, who I want to point out, in which the media has not paid a lot of attention to, is the CEO of a private IT company, including Citrix, that has millions of dollars in IT contracts with the federal government. And not only is he still operating as the installed DOGE person at Treasury, he's actively still the CEO of this private company. How is that even legal? Is it legal? I don't think it's legal because the federal court is trying to shut this down. We also know that that 25-year-old software engineer, in violation of the court order, was actually given access to modify the code. So what is going on here? And why is this such a threat to the American people? Why are thousands of people calling us? It's because of the size and the significance of these payments, because it is an invasion of the privacy and security of the American people, because it could threaten our ability as a country if there was a default in the debt ceiling, and because it contains highly classified information that our foreign adversaries are trying to cyber attack us regularly for. So why is a private citizen being given access to this system? We know they're trying to shut down payments. They're trying to shut down agencies. What's next? Are they going to shut down your Social Security payments? We don't know, because they have no oversight, and Elon Musk will not come in front of this committee. And in fact, the Treasury folks are saying this is the biggest insider threat they've ever seen in the history of the agency. So we are sounding the alarm, and no matter how many executive orders that Donald Trump signs or how many tweets that the VP sends, you cannot rewrite the Constitution, and we are going to hold you to account. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields, and I now recognize, oh, yes.
I have 3 documents I want to submit for the record. The
What
first document is the Constitution, Article 2. I would like to submit that for the record. That clearly spells out the president's authority. I would also like to submit for the record 5 U.S. Code 3161, the employment compensation of employees, which clearly spells out his authority to create DOGE. And then I want to submit for the record the executive order that Trump issued on January 20th of 2025, establishing DOGE officially.
Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for hosting this committee. If we've learned anything so far, it's that Republicans want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from our federal government and save taxpayer dollars, and Democrats want to grandstand and play politics. We can see right now, even of the 6 Democrats on this committee, only 1 can even be bothered to stay for the duration of this hearing. All we've heard about for most of this hearing from the other side of the aisle is Elon Musk, Elon Musk, Elon Musk, unelected bureaucrat. And I'd like to ask if Democrats really care about unelected bureaucrats making decisions over our lives, where were they whenever their god, Anthony Fauci, was forcing vaccine and mask mandates on the American people for 4 years during the, during the COVID crisis? Where were they whenever unelected Alejandro Mayorkas was facilitating the invasion of our country by illegal aliens who were murdering and raping and pillaging our people? Where were they whenever the Secretary of Education, unelected Cardona, targeted states and schools and people who were disagreed with his view of the radical left's transgender ideology? Where were they whenever Gary Gensler, former chairman of the SEC, also unelected, was lawlessly thwarting the development of financial markets, particularly in the crypto space, by lawlessly pursuing regulation via enforcement? They were nowhere to be seen because they don't care, because all of those things benefited their side of the aisle at the expense of ours. And perhaps that's also why they don't seem to be very interested in rooting out improper payments from our federal government. If you wonder why so many people are cynical about American politics, this is it. This is exactly why. The reality is that Elon Musk serves as an employee of the president, and we were given a massive mandate to carry out what he's been doing. His job is to carry out the will of the American people as expressed through the executive. That's exactly how the Constitution is supposed to work. The Constitution did not create an unelected, unaccountable 4th branch of government in the administrative state. The American people know this. My colleague Brian Jack discussed some of the opinion polls recently. We are doing, and President Trump is doing, exactly what he was elected to do. And that's why he's polling at a 53% approval rating, higher than he was at any point during his first administration. Even Elon Musk and his DOGE efforts now are polling at a 49% approval rating, which, just to point out, is 16 points higher than President Biden was polling at whenever he finished his term in office. The Democrat Party has for decades systematically grown and weaponized the administrative state against the American people, and the American people have had enough of it. Right now, we're talking about $2.7 trillion in improper payments since 2003. We're uncovering what could be the biggest money laundering scandal in American history. And the other side of the aisle could care less. They have no concern about where this money went, to what entities it went, to what governments, to what people or groups, nothing. All they want to talk about is Elon Musk incessantly. So it does make me wonder, if they don't care about where it's going, do they have an idea? Because what we've uncovered so far is that so much of the waste, fraud, and abuse of our federal government is actually funding their side of the aisle. It's funding media outlets that are running cover for Democrats routinely. The NPR, PBS, the BBC, Politico. It's going to fund left-wing NGOs that are facilitating the invasion of our country. It's going to fund left-wing transgender activism and sex changes all over the globe. This is money that's being used, taken from the American people and used against their interests. If you care about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, we should be serious about this. I'm very excited to be on this committee. I'm excited to expose what's being going on. Thank you, Madam Chair, and with that, I yield.
The gentleman yields. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses again for their testimonies today. I now yield to the ranking member for closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Well, I never thought so many conspiracy theories and wild accusations could be wound into one 5-minute speech, but I appreciate my friends across the aisle. First of all, let's talk about this massive mandate that supposedly brought Donald Trump into office. Donald Trump did not run on putting an unelected billionaire in charge of dismantling the federal government. He ran on lowering prices for Americans. And I think it's interesting that while we're sitting here this morning, the top of the New York Times is reporting that inflation has risen unexpectedly as food and energy prices have soared. What's going on, guys? I thought you were going to tackle inflation and food and energy prices. Isn't that what the executive orders were supposed to do? Oh, wait. Or is dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion in our federal agencies and putting an ideological agenda and trying to fire the federal workforce your actual agenda? Have you been too busy trying to actually address the fiscal health of this country? Because the numbers are telling us that you have. So let's be real about what's going on here. I also want to point out that literally while we've been sitting here for the last almost 2 hours getting lectured on fiscal responsibility, literally the Republicans just released their plan to raise the debt limit while we were sitting here. And they want to raise it by $4 trillion. Okay, guys, like literally, I'm just like without words. Inflation is going up. You want to raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. You want to gut Medicare. You want to gut Medicaid. You're talking about going after Social Security after promising that you wouldn't. I mean, really, what the heck is going on here? We're not trying to take down Elon Musk as a businessman. This dude is literally breaking the law inside of the federal government. And for a party that is supposed to be the party of law and order, in quotes, I really do not see you holding him accountable and doing your most basic constitutional responsibility in the separation of powers. So I want to end where I started. We are the Oversight Committee. We are the people's house for the United States of America. We represent the American people. And so, Mr. Elon Musk If you would like to appear in front of the Oversight Committee, you have been duly invited. Please come tell us what you're doing, come testify in front of the American people, and please come hold yourself to account. With that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now recognize myself for closing remarks. President Trump was elected with a mandate to rein in unaccountable bureaucracy in Washington and to wage war on waste. I know that because I campaigned alongside him, and so did my colleagues. This hearing was the first battle of that war, and in the coming days, the subcommittee will release a report with legislative solutions to the problems we have identified here today. We aren't going to wait all the way until the end of this Congress. We're going to get to work immediately. The bureaucrats who have run Washington for decades are beyond the point of forgiveness. Their sheer incompetence and pure spite for the hardworking American people have resulted in total failure. The federal government has made over $2.7 trillion in improper payments since 2003. Including $236 billion in 2023 alone. Those are trillions of dollars that honest Americans have paid in taxes at gunpoint over the years. As we approach April 15th, Americans are once again preparing to do their taxes and fork over their unfair share of money it takes to run this country. And I have to tell you, the American people have not been getting their money's worth for a long time. Most improper payments in recent years were issued through 5 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit, Pandemic Unemployment Insurance, and the Paycheck Protection Program. But a total of 16 federal programs had improper payment rates of 10% or more in 2023. That includes SNAP, the federal food stamp program, which paid out $10 billion taxpayer dollars improperly. To get their arms around this problem, Elon Musk and the DOGE team went straight to the source. They went to the Treasury Department's Fiscal Service, which makes about 90% of the trillions in federal payments issued annually. The audit of these payment systems was long overdue. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent gave DOGE employees working for the government read-only access to these systems so they could conduct that initial audit. That audit is already paying dividends. Musk learned that the databases federal agencies are supposed to check to prevent payments to fraudsters, crime rings, and dead people are not being kept up to date. Going forward, we are going to get more mileage out of these do not pay databases. That means fewer improper payments and less fraud and waste of taxpayer dollars. Despite this fraud that's already been revealed, a federal judge in New York issued a ruling last Friday that ran totally contrary to the will of the people. The judge blocked not only DOGE, but the Treasury Secretary himself from accessing his own agency's payment systems. That's absurd. Only career Treasury Department unelected bureaucrats can access the system, the judge ruled. This turns the Constitution on its head. We will hold this judge and others who try to stop the will of the people and their elected leaders accountable. As is written in the Federalist Papers, the judiciary has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or the wealth of the society. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm for the efficacy of its judgments. But the whole DC swamp is freaking out that the unelected officials from DOGE were allowed access to these systems. That makes no sense. Federal judges were not elected. The Treasury bureaucrats were not elected, and they have failed to fix the problem that is enabling American taxpayers to be robbed. So why not bring in skilled outside experts like private companies and private citizens who are successful in the real world to do everyday work that we need to get done here, like audits? Of course, federal payment systems are only one link in the improper payment chain. We need to look at other links in the chain. We need better front-end identify verification to screen out fraudsters, and we need to close eligibility loopholes. That means not letting applicants self-attest to their own eligibility. And it means ending categorical eligibility, which lets someone who fraudulently qualifies for one federal benefit automatically get other federal benefits. Finally, we need to better coordinate fraud prevention efforts between federal governments and the states. These are all issues that we will be taking a hard look at in this committee and coming up with solutions to, including legislation and referrals to committees of jurisdiction that will deliver for the American people. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses.